Campana, the lookout. If you were a Campana, you were probably 12, maybe 13. The Medellin cartel recruited its lookouts from the comunas, the hillside barrios above the city where the state barely reached, and Pablo Escobar was already a legend. Someone's older brother handed you a prepaid phone and pointed at the corner. Your job was to watch. Cops, military, unfamiliar faces, anything wrong, you called. That was it. You didn't touch product. You didn't carry weapons. You stood there, hour after hour, in the same spot, in the same neighborhood, where everyone already knew what you were doing and nobody said a word. The cartel paid you more in a week than your father made in a month at the market. La Kika personally oversaw the recruitment of boys like you from the barrios. He knew that a child raising his phone to his ear looked like nothing at all. You told yourself it was temporary, just until things got better. At night, you counted the bills and didn't think about what came next. Mula, the courier. If you were a mula, you moved the product and you did not ask where it came from or where it was going. A kilo brick, double wrapped in plastic, inside a bag, inside another bag. Sometimes you swallowed it in latex-wrapped pellets. Sometimes you wore it strapped beneath your clothes on a commercial flight out of El Dorado. The Medellin cartel's early mules flew directly into Miami when the Caribbean corridor was open. Later, after authorities tightened the routes, Gustavo Gaviria, Escobar's cousin, who ran logistics, developed new methods. Cocaine dissolved into wine bottles, mixed into the fibers of blue jeans, packed into shipments of legal cargo so ordinary that customs agents waved them through without a second look. You were one of dozens making runs that week. If you were caught, the cartel would not come for you. There was no lawyer on retainer, no call from above. You took the sentence and you kept your mouth shut because the alternative to silence had already been made clear. Coquinero, the chemist. If you were a coquinero, you lived in the jungle and you almost never left. The Medellin cartel operated cocaine processing laboratories hidden deep in the Colombian interior. Facilities that took coca paste sourced from Peru and Bolivia and refined it into pure cocaine hydrochloride ready for export. The largest of these, Tranquilandia, was discovered by Colombian authorities in 1984 and contained 14 labs and 13 tons of finished cocaine on site. You worked in shifts. The chemicals were corrosive and the ventilation was poor. You wore what protective equipment existed, which was not much. The work was precise. Temperature, concentration, timing. A mistake in the process wasted a product worth more than your life. You were paid, housed, and fed inside the compound. You did not know exactly where you were. You had not seen your family in months. Armed guards were present at all times, and you understood that their function was not only to protect the operation from outsiders. Piloto, the smuggler. If you were a piloto, you flew. In the early 1980s, the Medellin cartel's primary cocaine corridor ran through the Caribbean. Small planes loaded with hundreds of kilos, navigating at low altitude to avoid radar, landing on private airstrips in the Bahamas, Nicaragua, and Cuba before the product made its way into Florida. Carlos later purchased an entire island, Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, and turned it into a private transshipment hub. You flew in and out of Norman's Cay at night. No flight plan, no radio contact, landing by the light of vehicles positioned along the strip. Your cut per flight was enough to buy a house. The risk was prison or death, in roughly equal measure, depending on who found you first. When the Caribbean corridor closed in the mid-1980s after increased DEA pressure, the routes shifted through Mexico. The Guadalajara cartel became the Medellin cartel's logistics partner on the ground. You adapted. The sky was the same, only the landing coordinates changed. Sicario, the assassin. If you were a sicario, you were recruited as a teenager from Medellin's comunas and you were paid to kill. The cartel maintained an army of contract killers, young men, most of them poor, some barely 16, to protect routes, eliminate rivals, and enforce the organization's authority over Colombian institutions. La Kika coordinated recruitment. The Prisco brothers, Pablo Escobar's top assassins, ran their own crews. Sicarios operated on motorcycles in pairs. One drove, one shot. The method was efficient, anonymous, and fast. Targets included rival traffickers, police officers, judges, journalists, and politicians. In 1989 alone, the cartel killed more than 1,000 people in Medellin. You were paid per job. The cartel called this the vacuna, a fixed rate for a confirmed kill, verified by the news. Escobar offered bonuses for the police. The younger you were, the less anyone suspected you. Your face was not in any database. After each job, you handed the weapon to someone else. You went home. You waited for the phone to ring again. Contador, the money man. If you were a contador, you had a more dangerous problem than anyone carrying a gun. The Medellin cartel was generating an estimated $100 million per day at its peak, roughly 80 to 90% of all cocaine entering the United States. That money had to become clean money. Gustavo Gaviria, Escobar's cousin, ran the financial operation before his death in 1990. The mechanism was layering. Cash moved through car washes, cattle farms, construction companies, and real estate. Storefronts that appeared to be legitimate businesses absorbed drug proceeds and produced documentation that held up under inspection. Escobar buried cash in barrels on his rural estates when the volume exceeded what could be laundered quickly. He wrote off 10% annually to rats and moisture, the cost of doing business at scale. You kept the records that could not exist officially and the ones that had to. One discrepancy in the wrong column, one conversation overheard, and your expertise became a liability rather than an asset. Teniente, the lieutenant. If you were a teniente, you sat close to the center of the Medellin cartel, but never at it. Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, El Mexicano, commanded his own sicario networks and production infrastructure while operating under Escobar's broader alliance. The Ochoa brothers controlled transport fleets and independent trafficking pipelines. At this level, you ran entire regions. You managed plaza bosses, maintained relationships with corrupt military commanders and judges, and controlled distribution networks across international borders. The cartel's motto, plata o plomo, silver or lead, was your operating tool. Officials who accepted payment were maintained on monthly retainers. Those who refused were killed. Judges who ruled against the cartel were assassinated. Presidential candidates who opposed them were shot in public. You did not make those decisions alone, but you implemented them. When a 3-ton shipment was intercepted, $30 million gone, you were the one who found out whether it was bad luck or a betrayal, and you handled it accordingly. The higher you climbed, the more you knew. The more you knew, the more reasons there were for someone to need you gone. You slept lightly, trusted rarely, and understood that loyalty in this world lasted only as long as it remained useful to someone more powerful above you. Pablo Escobar, the kingpin. If you were Pablo Escobar, you started with nothing. A family that could not pay for school, petty crime in Medellin's streets, stolen tombstones, contraband cigarettes, kidnappings for cash, then coca paste from Peru, then cocaine, then a cartel. At the peak of the Medellin cartel's operations in the mid-1980s, you controlled roughly 80% of the cocaine reaching the United States and were generating billions per year. Forbes listed you among the wealthiest people on earth. You built housing for the poor in Medellin, funded football pitches, and handed out money in the comunas. And the comunas protected you in return. You ran for Congress. You had a justice minister assassinated. You declared war on the Colombian state, and the Colombian state eventually had to negotiate with you. Generals, judges, and presidents all had your number. You were not a figure in the hierarchy. You were the hierarchy. And you knew, because you had watched it happen to every man before you, that it ended one of two ways. In December 1993, the Colombian National Police tracked Escobar down to a house in Los Olivos, Medellin. He was shot on the roof while attempting to escape.